Have you ever considered that staying in your job or taking a job might in fact be a real mistake? Hi, my name's Lorna Rasmussen, and I want to discuss today the cost of having a job. We started that discussion in the last video that I did, but I want to do this in the context of a story that I heard on television a number of years ago, because I think it's so illustrative of what can happen to people. A woman who had left her job to have a child. She'd stayed at home for somewhere in the neighborhood of a year or so with her child. Finally decided, she and her husband, that they just simply couldn't afford to have her as a stay-at-home mom, that they really needed her income. So she went back to work and, of course, put her child in childcare. After about a year, she was involved in this television program where they looked at the cost of her job, and that not just the cost in terms of the childcare, but the clothing and the lunches out, all the stuff that we talked about in the other video. Anyway, at the very end, with a close-up on this woman's face, they gave her the results of what her financial impact, her taking that job, and the financial impact on her family was. And what was determined was that that job had cost her $3,000. So in that year that she had worked, that she had sacrificed her child, time with her child, that she had put her child in childcare, which can be a good thing or bad thing depending on the child, that had cost her family $3,000. Wow. That was a real eye-opener for me, because oftentimes when people are in financial challenging times, they opt for what they know rather than what they don't know. And I remember my mother going through this exact same thing, this exact same decision as to whether or not she should take a job. She took some part-time jobs. She did a little of this, a little of that. She when the elections came, she took a little job in the elections, and she did all kinds of things to make some extra money for our family. But it was always a challenge for her, and it was always a question of what she was giving up for what she was getting. That story that I just shared with you really illustrates that there are times when the cost, particularly in terms of taxes, make a huge difference. That woman finally decided to stay at home and create a daycare center in her home and do a home-based business, because she would get tax advantages. Plus, she wouldn't have incurred all the costs of having a job. So the whole point of this conversation is for you to take a look at your job and what you're getting from your job financially. Now, I'm sure many of you are making a lot of money in your job, but the question is, at what cost? And it's not just a financial cost. Oftentimes the costs are in intangibles: time away from your family, stress, the things that we don't necessarily put a dollar figure on that can really impact us in the end. So I want you to ask yourself the question: is staying in my job or keeping my job what I should be doing? And if I decide I shouldn't stay there, then what are the alternatives? And that's what we'll be talking about in upcoming blogs, because I believe that people should at least know what the alternatives are. The alternatives are not for everybody, but there's some great alternatives out there. And there's some that I chose that I am very grateful for, because they've allowed me the lifestyle and the flexibility that I really need. So I hope that you'll join us in those later blogs, and all the best.